In this episode of Boruto, Cho-Cho goes from thick to thin. A major story arc just ended and it's time for a little bit of levity, and that's exactly what you're going to get in this episode of Boruto Naruto Next Generations, an episode which focuses on Choji and Karui's ridiculous and rambunctious daughter, Cho-Cho. Lover or hater, she is here to stay, and this entire episode is filled to the brim with her ridiculous antics. And you know what? I like Cho-Cho. Initially, I thought she was kind of a one-note character. She pretty much only had one character trait. However, this episode actually delved into her actual personality a little bit more, and while she is very confident, she also has a surprising number of insecurities, and a lot of that has to do with her weight. She comes from a pretty thick family. Just look at Choji. The Akamichis have always been known as being sort of the big people in Konoha Village, and Cho-Cho will be damned if this is something that's going to define her entire personality. And that all comes to a head in this episode right here, which was silly, fun, and had some surprisingly awesome action scenes. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. This entire episode right here is all about Team 7 and Team 10 having to go on a bodyguard mission. They're going to be protecting these two actors by the name of Tomaru and Ashina. They are the stars of this very popular ninja soap opera, a series that Cho-Cho is completely obsessed with. When she's not doing her ninja training or guzzling down consomme potato chips, she is obsessed over watching this show, and she desperately is in love with the male lead, who luckily she ends up getting to spend a lot of time with in this episode right here. What is also very interesting about this episode is how they sort of poke fun at the fact that these actors are just so freaking over the top and melodramatic in every single way. I think it's played up for a lot of laughs in this episode. There's a great scene where when the two actors are actually introduced, they explain that the reason that they need bodyguards is because people have been sending them threatening letters. They've been sending them death threats, so to speak. And when they actually introduce this concept for the first time, they're in Naruto's office, and Tomaru, the male lead of this show, walks up to the window, slowly pulls down the blind, except for every other one in the room, just to add a little bit of dramatic tension to the scene. And I'll be damned if it's not absolutely hilarious. But the main thing to actually take away from this episode is that, like Choji, Cho-Cho has actually mastered the butterfly technique, which allows her to expand her chakra and actually shrink her down to a much thinner size, to the point where when people see her, they almost don't even recognize her. Or maybe that's just Boruto being completely stupid. But basically throughout the entire episode, she is making it appear as if she's actually very thin and tall, which is not the way she is at all. Not to mention she's also been changing her personality, trying to act a little more confident than usual, but ultimately, Cho-Cho's not being herself, and that's pretty much the main message of the entire episode, which is to accept who you are and to embrace and own it. Cho-Cho has never had a problem with this in the past, but when she is confronted by someone that she's obsessed with and loves, her personality instantly changes, and this is something that a lot of viewers are going to be able to relate to. As someone who's kind of a big fella himself, I completely understand exactly what she's going through, although over time, I learned that really you do simply just have to be yourself, and eventually you will find love. That being said, watching Cho-Cho go through all of this stuff is just awesome. It's kind of like a train wreck in slow motion, and every single character is dealing with a lot of different things. Team 7, Boruto's team, is having to deal with the female lead who goes by the name of Ashina, and while she's very pretty, she comes across as very conceited and seems to look down on just about every single person. Her bodyguards are effectively just her butlers, with Sarada having to put up with a lot of crap, Mitsuki just sort of going with the flow as usual, and Boruto completely falling head over heels in love with this actress, but it doesn't really lead anywhere. It's just there for laughs, and honestly, it works really well. Seeing Sarada get particularly pissed off is really funny, I have to say. But most of the episode focuses on Cho-Cho. Her team is actually going to be looking after Tomaru, and Tomaru is an actor to a fault. Even when he's not on screen, he puts on this ridiculous and hilarious persona, which basically makes him look like a pretty boy. And throughout most of the episode, Cho-Cho is acting like she doesn't care, this isn't a big deal, she's just doing this to do this. but on the inside she's incredibly nervous and afraid that Tomorrow is going to figure out what she really looks like, which is what she regularly looks like. And there's a great action sequence towards the end of the episode where we get to see the supposed assailant here, who is some sort of ninja wearing a gas mask who uses poison bomb weapons. And this entire action scene, I have to say, was actually done with a little bit of gusto, good animation, and some solid artwork. In fact, this entire episode was pretty good, despite the fact that you could effectively call it a filler episode. I like that they actually build on Cho-Cho a little bit. She's almost been way too confident throughout the entire series, so to finally show off some of her weaknesses, I really think is going to help develop her as a character a little bit more, and maybe will even make her a little sympathetic to people who frankly just don't care for Cho-Cho in the first place. But the episode ends with this big disaster going on with this guy attacking. One of the people who's going to be acting in the show gets injured, and they have to find someone at the last second. Tomaru has formed a strong relationship with Cho-Cho throughout the entire episode and proposes that she should be the replacement for this show, and Cho-Cho gets super excited, ending the episode knowing that she's about to be in a big TV show with her favorite star, and this could potentially lead to love and even marriage. So, what's the rundown on this episode of Boruto Naruto Next Generations? I was almost ready to tear this episode a new one when I heard about the concept of it and I looked at the preview, but I actually really enjoyed this episode a lot. It had good production value, and all of the scenes with Cho-Cho I thought were very welcome. She has had a number of episodes devoted to her in Boruto, and I have to say that the anime series has done a really good job of actually making me care about her and not just seeing her as a one-note joke, which is she's the fat character who likes to eat food. This is an episode which truly delves a little bit more into her insecurities, and thus it makes her a lot more relatable to the viewer, especially for those who tend to put on the pounds a little bit. So it actually did work in that sense. I also just loved how ridiculous the actors were in this episode. I can't stress that enough. The scene where the guy pulls down the blinds in Naruto's office, it's hard not to laugh at that, and how he's constantly on, and how his partner, Ashina, the female actress, does not care about anything, to the point where I almost feel like she's trying to sabotage the show, and she might actually end up being the villain in the end. There's a cool little mystery here, too, which I think is really exciting, and if you wanted to see more of Mitsuki interacting with Orochimaru, well, guess what? You're gonna get it. They have a small sparring scene in this episode, which is pretty thrilling, if a little short-lived, but the scene mostly is here so Mitsuki can get some permission from Orochimaru, his parent, who, again, says he's not really his father, he's not really his mother, he's somewhere in between, and even Orochimaru admits from time to time he's been a man and a woman. While I don't like to get too political in my reviews, I will say that this episode is definitely going to resonate with a lot of viewers, especially younger ones nowadays, with the current political and cultural climate that's going on in our world. There's a lot of themes in this episode that I think people are really going to enjoy, and when you tie that up with all of the great Naruto action that you've loved from the franchise, you're certainly going to get a lot of kicks out of this one right here. Also, I think it's really cool that Cho-Cho has already mastered the butterfly technique, something that Choji didn't even fully master until he was a Chunin, and considering that she's still a Genin at this point, that's a pretty big accomplishment, and for her to be able to maintain her chakra and keep that form during this entire episode is very impressive. And while it was kind of cool getting to see a thinner version of Cho-Cho, I definitely prefer the more rotund version. So all in all, this was a pretty good episode, which has some good development, some surprisingly fun action scenes, lots of humor. This was a solid addition to the series. I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you're a fan of Cho-Cho, or even if you're not a fan of Cho-Cho, this might actually make you think a little differently about her. So I'm going to give this episode, believe it or not, a 5 out of 5. I'm very excited to see where this entire story is going to be headed, and I can't wait to see a little bit more of Cho-Cho utilize those awesome butterfly abilities, and maybe even embrace who she truly is in the next episode. We all know it's going to happen. Who knows, there could be some fun twists and turns in this mini arc before we move on to the next one. So that's my thoughts on the episode. I'd love to get all of yours, however, and you can tell me all of them in the comment section below, and what you hope to see from the rest of the Boruto anime series. Let's get a discussion going, guys. Thank you all for watching this review. Make sure to check out my channel for tons of other anime reviews and discussions. I'll see you guys next time. And as always, stay down now, baby.